Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 72. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you live stream every weeknight and you put out 3 YouTube videos a week. How could you possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This has been a big ol' week of wargaming, so let's get the boringest thing out of the way first. Games Workshop showed off some new squat models. Games Workshop has been slowly drip feeding us all of the new squat models for this new range, the Leagues of Votann, an entire new army with super high-tech, sophisticated technology with moon buggies and exo armor suits and all sorts of really intricate, nitty-gritty, highly advanced technology. And so this week they showed off some half-naked berserkers. The Leagues of Votann let loose the augmented fury of the Chthonian berserkers. We've seen a lot of the Leagues of Votann so far. The Hearthkin warriors make up the core of every kin host, often riding in paired Sagittar ATVs. They said it again, paired Sagittar ATVs. They said that in the article where they showed off the ATVs, the moon buggies first. And so they've said paired twice, but it looks like a big enough vehicle that you're not gonna get 2 of them. Like, it looks a tiny bit bigger than the Gene Stealer cult Goliath Rock Grinder, and those are sold individually. So are they gonna sell 2 in a box, or are they just putting it in our minds, hey, you should buy 2 of the Sagittar ATVs? While the mighty Enai or Hearthguard unleash salvos of devastating firepower, and from out of this solid front line strikes an unexpected sight, furious Chthonian berserkers. And right off the bat, before anybody gets mad at me, the models look good. They're very well designed, they're sharp, they're crisp, they're detailed, they're lovely. I don't like them. Conceptually, it's just weird. Why are they half naked? Why did they take their armor off? The courageous warriors of the Chthonian Mining Guild represent some of the most heavily augmented kin, unreasonably brave souls who have enhanced the physical capabilities of their clone kins with cybernetic upgrades, all the better to extract precious minerals from rad-plagued nebula, explosive asteroids, and fathomless ocean depths. Rad-plagued nebulas, explosive asteroids, and fathomless ocean depths. That sounds like perfect situations to wear your armor, at least a helmet. I don't get it. It's kind of cool looking, and I think axe-wielding maniacs with their nipples out makes sense for dwarfs. It's like a dwarfy thing. It just doesn't. If you're going for hyper advanced squats, I feel like you go for hyper advanced squats. I mean, not squats who, some of them are computer nerds and then some of them are just ripping their clothes off and getting ready to get into some close combat. It's just weird to me. Again, the models look great. They're lovely. They're cool. They're very well detailed. I like the giant punchy robot fists. Maybe on different things. In the muscled or mechanical hands of the Chthonian berserkers, these tools become weapons that can penetrate heavy armor of alien carapaces just as easily as stubborn rock and stone. They've got humongous double-handed plasma axes. It looks like gravity hammers, kind of like the Space Marines grav weapon, and giant punchy fists, which I really hope that it probably won't happen. This is a box of 5 guys, surely. Just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 5 sculpts. Hopefully it'll come with 5 sets of each weapon. So, which it might, because these guys are small, very small. So I could see it coming with the correct number of weapons. I wonder if some of them are going to be special weapons, like you take 4 pairs of fists and 1 hammer, or you take 4 pairs of axes and 1 hammer. But yeah, please let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these guys, because I feel like they are just not fitting in at all to all of the current stuff that they've shown off. You've got robots, and then you've got guys with their muscles out. Suns out, guns out, dwarf edition. It would have been cool if actually one of these guys was a shirtless robot. I would be down for that. That is an idea I can get behind. You got some buff dudes, and then standing next to him is like a robot who's also flexing and has like robotic muscles. That would have been kind of interesting. It also would have been kind of interesting if, because it says that these guys are the way that they are because they're constantly operating in very dangerous environments. And so why not have them have like radiation suits or like super specific specialized armor? The old original Exo Armor squat egg suits would actually have fit in perfectly. Like just a giant slab of metal protecting them from all sorts of problems. Maybe it could even be all pitted and dented up from years of mining. I mean, I guess it gets hot down in the mines, and so, you gotta take off some layers, otherwise you're gonna overheat. They all have a little camel pack with the little straw going up to their lips. I don't know, it's fine. It'll be really interesting. I wonder how much they have left to show off. We got our troops, we got our transport, we've got some bikers, some Terminators, and some close combat elite guys. So it'll be interesting to see what is left. How many more units before we get a Codex announcement? But yeah, the Chthonian Berserkers, spelt weirdly. Isn't Chthonian, isn't that the planet that, what Horus was found on? Isn't that Horus's homeworld from the Horus Heresy? Weird. Interesting, yeah. Neat stuff, very, very different. Whatever. So getting to what I worked on this week. Last week I talked all about how I was stripping a lot of models and I was absolutely miserable standing over the sink with a toothbrush, just furiously trying to get the paint off of the metal, and it was not working out for me. And so I tried an ultrasonic cleaner. This is the cheapest ultrasonic cleaner I could find on Amazon. I bought the cheapest one because I was sure this was dumb and pointless and garbage, because why would a little bit of shaking do anything? It turns out this thing rocks. I also switched stripping agents, just like those Chthonian guys stripping their clothes off. I switched from acetone, acetone to LA's Totally Awesome. And LA's Totally Awesome actually seems to be doing a much better job. I'm not much of a chemist, and so I just assumed the liquid that comes in the metal container that says danger all over it was the good stuff. I assumed that was the really potent stuff that was going to get the paint off the models, but actually the LA's Totally Awesome that's in a nice friendly yellow bottle is doing wonders. So I filled this sucker up with LA's Totally Awesome, threw some models in, and I let it run. Unfortunately, this unit only runs for, I think, 3 minutes, and then it shuts off. And so I was, had my laptop open, just watching some Netflix or something, and I would just turn it on every now and again, and it took the paint right off. I stripped another unit of Terminators, and I stripped a whole bunch of special units for my soon-to-be retro Space Marine army, and it worked really well. I was wondering if maybe the Space Marines just happen to have loose paint, because I've bought tons of stuff on eBay before, and sometimes you get paint that just comes right off, and sometimes you get paint that will never, until the heat death of the universe, detach from the plastic. But I had complete success with those Terminators, and all of these special characters were purchased in different lots with different types of paint on them, and every single one stripped very easily. Except for this one librarian, he has a little bit of blue paint still on him, so I think I need to give him another soak in the ultrasonic cleaner, but I bet it will come off. And also, some people gave me some really nice suggestions in the comments of soaking models in LA's Totally Awesome for a day or two and then putting them in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I feel like that actually might be the trick. Especially with one like this that shuts off every 3 minutes, and so I let them soak for 2 days, move them into the ultrasonic cleaner to vibrate the paint off. I had to do almost no scrubbing whatsoever. A couple of them had like a little tough piece of paint that didn't want to come off, but I mean, last week I had to sit there with a toothpick and poke the paint off of the model, whereas with these guys, it was just one brush with the toothbrush and the paint came off. So it turns out it's not a gimmick. Ultrasonic cleaners are kind of awesome. I also use this to clean all of my airbrushes, and I feel like it did a much better job of cleaning them than I ever have with regular old soap and water. So, yeah. I don't know if everyone needs one of these in their collection. This is still 20 bucks, so it's not the cheapest thing in the world. But if you strip models, or maybe if you have a large collection of airbrushes that often need cleaning, it might not be a bad move to buy a cheapy little ultrasonic cleaner. I was very, very surprised. It's just a little shaken. I mean, ultrasonic shaking, I suppose, but it's just a little shaking, and yet it actually does a lot of work. So super, super shocked and surprised, and I'm really excited because I have so many models that need the paint off, and so hopefully it'll actually be a fairly easy, straightforward process. Still not a fun process. I would much prefer not having to do that. I do not like stripping paint off of models. I almost never do it, but if you want old stuff like this, it's kind of your only way to do it, because there's some stuff out there that is still like new in packaging, but that stuff charges an absolute premium as opposed to just sniping random eBay lots of painted models. So really, really excited about that ultrasonic cleaner. It did a really good job. But speaking of things that got me excited this week, I painted up the Blade Guard Veteran, which you've all seen in the Wednesday video, and I had so much fun painting these. I took a long break from my Black Templar, and because I've painted 10,000 points of Black Templar, I feel like I've done enough, or I'm bored of black armor. Black is a really, really tough color to paint, but I really had a good time painting these. They came together quickly, they came together easily. I came up with a new way of painting black armor using Games Workshop contrast paint mixed with some other stuff. You gotta watch the video. And I just had so much fun painting these. I wanted to keep that experience going. I wanted to get back into the Black Templar. And so I decided to buy a very, very similar unit, the Sword Brethren. Almost the same exact thing as the Blade Guard Veteran. In fact, I'll probably get the names wrong a few times in this video. But the Sword Brethren are essentially the same unit except for without the Storm Shield, which means that they have a worse save, but they still get 3 attacks each. And you have lots of options of what weapons to kit them out with. I decided to go all swords and all pistols. I might be regretting that because I think a power sword, or not a power sword, a power hammer, thunder hammer. It's not power, it's thunder, even though it uses power and is technically a power weapon. A thunder hammer on the sergeant because it would just add a little tiny extra punch. Although if something can handle 15 power sword punches, maybe the Sword Brethren aren't meant to kill that particular target. But these models are exceptional. I have most Space Marine units that I've collected over the past 8 years, and I love them, and I love the olds, and I like Primaris Marines a lot. And I actually hadn't really noticed, but I haven't actually bought any of the new Black Templar stuff. Games Workshop came out with a whole new range of Black Templar models, and I haven't bought any of them. So this is my first dipping my toe into the new Black Templar models. These are phenomenal. These are so cool. I mean, in 2011, if there were models like this on the shelf, holy cow. Compare this to a classic Tactical Marine or the Sword Brethren that I built back in the day, which was just normal Tactical Marines with chain swords. Ugh, they performed so badly in game, but yeah, that was, I got into Black Templar at exactly the wrong time. But now it's a great time to be into Black Templar because they have so many cool new units and rules. So I really, really like these models. Now, the flip side of that awesomeness coin, prove me wrong, or explain to me why I'm wrong in the comments, but Games Workshop instructions suck. It might just be me. I find it so confusing. The 1A, 1B, 1C highlighted pink, 2B, 2A, 1E, 1D, 3C, 2D, 2B, 2C, orange versus green. They keep changing what color things are. Like, I mean, Lego is the gold standard of instructions, and Legos are simpler than Games Workshop miniatures, but I really wish that they would just stick with like one thing. Have, the steps you did in the last panel blue, and then have the parts that you're gonna glue to those blue parts pink, and just keep it like that for the whole book, because if all of the 1 instructions are going to be slightly blue, and all of the 3 instructions are gonna be slightly green, I don't know, maybe maybe it's just something wrong with my brain that I am just completely not designed for the way Games Workshop lays out their instructions. But I find it so difficult, and these models have so many parts. It's wild. I was careful. I built them all according to the instructions, and when I was done, I missed a couple of parts and I had to go back and put them on after the fact. And sometimes things don't seem to be correct. Like these guns, step 1D is to put on the guns. So they're highlighted blue to let you know that you're adding the blue parts. But then in the next step, this arm is highlighted blue, but the shoulder pad you're supposed to glue on is not highlighted anything, even though that's a new part for this step. I don't get it. It's not at all the end of the world, and these instructions will totally, do the job, but I just think that they're bad. There's also some just weird, annoying little things, like all of the backpacks and all of the shoulder pads can fit on any of the models. And so, but they're all labeled something different on the sprue. They're all 65 or 69 or 42, but in the instructions on like page 1, it says, oh, by the way, parts number 91, 16, 45, 18, and 7, all the shoulder pads, we're just gonna call them 2A. And so every time you see 2A in the instructions, you know to grab a shoulder pad. Why not just call them all 2A on the sprue? Or just not have them be a number and just say grab a shoulder pad. It's just a little confusing to have them labeled on the sprue, but then not really labeled in the instructions. And it's the same way for the backpacks. Frustrating, I don't know. And I think these guys just happen to be a slightly more complicated kit with a lot more parts than like a tactical squad or an intercessor squad. And so I just never sort of noticed these details, these problems in the instructions when I was building those. But yeah, they definitely showed up when I was building these fairly complicated guys. I was able to put them together though, so I guess the instructions were fine. But Games Workshop, if you're listening, and I know you are, maybe get a new engineer to maybe take another crack at these instructions, because I think that they could be better. Although speaking of things that could be better, I don't know if these guys could be. They're really, really good. If you build them as the Sword Brethren, if you want the cape, you do have to build them in the poses that it suggests. But if you don't want to glue on the cape, the body is completely separate from the cape. The shoulders are completely separate from the cape. The backpacks are completely separate from the cape. So you can leave the cape off and glue your arms however you want, or glue on whatever arms you want. If you're a Dark Angels player, or you play one of the more gothic Space Marine chapters, I would suggest picking up these models and using them as some really cool sergeants and lieutenants, because they're not that Templared up. Maybe a couple of Templar symbols here and there, but they're pretty easy to cover. Or maybe you just leave them and let them have the Templar symbol and just like don't paint it to draw attention to it. These are really, really good bodies that you can do a ton of really interesting stuff with. Really like these models. And yeah, obviously if you glue on the cape, they also look pretty rad. Although the capes, a lot of the capes are in 2 parts, and I did have to do a little bit of gap filling. So if you're not super familiar with gap filling or like models where you might have to do a little touch-ups, I just found I had to put on a little bit of putty to get them perfect. And it was because of that freedom of, being able to pose the arms and have the cape not mess with everything. You do have to, you need to use plastic glue when you put together these models, because, if you glue the arm like this and then you put on the cape and you find out that it really needs to scooch down a little bit to get that cape to fit properly, you need to be able to make that change. And so with plastic glue, because it takes so long to dry, you have the ability to make that little scooch to make sure that it all works out nicely. But yeah, these models, excellent, wonderful, very excited. These make me really excited to get the rest of the new Black Templar models, because they're really, really cool and I really dig them. And man, do they just look better than Space Marines have ever looked. Dang, they're nice, saucy little models. And I'm gonna give them the exact same treatment I did to my Blade Guard veterans for the Sword Brethren. Look at me getting the names right. Good old new models. And speaking of new models, sort of, Privateer Press, the makers of Warmachine, put out a huge announcement that they are going to be coming out with Warmachine 4th edition. And I don't play Warmachine, although I do remember seeing all of the lovely Warmachine models at my friendly local game store back in the day. But Warmachine and Hordes 4th edition, and they have written a super long, really interesting article explaining why they're doing a 4th edition, what changes they expect to make, like what things that they're gonna do to make sure that all of the previous models are available to use in the new edition, what they've decided to keep, what they've decided to let go of. And we talk a lot about Games Workshop here, and we always have to kind of assume and guess and make theories about why they do the things that they do. And this is a really interesting article by Matt Wilson. And it's written very, very well, and it's kind of blunt in some areas, and it's just very enlightening and really interesting. I would suggest giving it a complete read, but the one thing that jumped out at me as being really interesting is that they've decided to drop metal as the material that they make their miniatures out of, and they just say that it's too expensive. They can't afford to make the models out of metal anymore. The metal is getting more and more expensive. And so they are going to be making their miniatures by 3D printing them, which is kind of cool. That does not mean that they're going to be selling STLs of Warmachine and Hordes. That means that they are going to be using 3D printing to manufacture the models that they are going to be sending to friendly local game stores and to people who purchase the models directly from them. And they say one thing that's really interesting, because it's like, yeah, cool. They're going to use 3D printers. 3D printers do good work. You're going to buy a 3D printed model. Cool. But what's really interesting is that they mentioned that they are going to be using this so that they can have manufacturing hubs in different places. And so there can be somebody in America manufacturing the Warmachine and Hordes models for America, and they can have somebody in Europe manufacturing the models for Europe. And that's actually really cool that everything is going to be essentially local because of the freedom that 3D printing offers. Because if they make metal models, wherever they have the molds is where the metal models have to get made, and then they got to get shipped wherever they're going to go. And it gets even worse with like plastic models manufactured in China or somewhere where you send them the designs, and then they have to acquire the plastic, and then they manufacture the sprues 10,000 units, and then they ship it back to. Then you put it in the boxes and you figure out what you want to do with it, and then you ship it to the other place, and all of that supply chain becomes big and long and unwieldy. And I think it's really cool, and it'll be really interesting to keep an eye on how this 3D print manufacturing goes for them. Because the classic 3D printed model is pretty darn good. Thinking about like the goo that comes with the 3D printer, that's a little fragile and terrible, but there's some really, really good resins out there that are robust and strong and look good. And so I cannot wait to see how this goes, because it's just such a neat idea. And I don't know almost anything about Warmachine and Hordes, but I know it's not like it's a big game, but it's not a game. Nothing is a Games Workshop game except for maybe Star Wars Legion. But it's interesting that I wonder if 3D printing is going to be the absolute perfect thing for them to be able to get everybody what they need. And like if they just sell more of one particular type of unit, they can just make more of that model. Like they can just boop, 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 and then it's printing more of that model. Because like if you think about like Games Workshop is removing a lot of their old fine cast models because it's like, do we really need to have 25,000 Dark Eldar Slith models in a warehouse somewhere just in case I order one and then they ship it to me? But if it just so happens that everybody is playing Khador, in the Netherlands, they can just have the Netherlands manufacture more of those Khador models for the players who need them. It's a really, really interesting and cool idea. And they sort of mention CO casting a little bit, and how CO casting faces some of the same problems as regular metal or resin casting, where you're kind of tied, your manufacturing is tied down to wherever those machines and the molds are. And so I'm really, really interested to see how this 3D printing works out for them, because it kind of sounds like the perfect solution. Very, very interesting. This is a really interesting, if you are kind of just into the idea of war games and the whole like ecosystem of tabletop wargaming, this is a really, really interesting article, because he talks about like the struggles of changing the rules and why do you change the rules. He talks about how they, you know, after, this is a 20-year-old game and they created 2,000 unique models, and at, you know, after, how long has Warmachine 3rd edition been out? 6 years? After so long and so many new additions to the game, like everything kind of gets bland because you can only spread those interesting rules and those interesting like rules and activations and stuff so much before it all becomes kind of boring, and sometimes you sort of need an addition change to kind of spice things up. And you know, people tend to jump on during new editions of a game, but then they tend to fall off the longer and longer you get away from that initial launch. It's really, really an interesting read. Good work, Matt Wilson. I wish all the best for Warmachine. It looks really, really cool. Very, very interesting stuff. But speaking of things that are very interesting, the Eons of Battle Patreon. Over there, we have a Miniature of the Month club with models available as STL or physical 3D prints. You also get access to one extra episode of Eons of Battle a week and a weekly hobby hangout where we all hop into a Discord server and just chit chat the night away. We also have merch, link in the description. Really excited to get these Sword Brethren. Before I turn on the camera, I was getting the names wrong constantly, but now I'm nailing it. Can't wait to paint these guys up. Bye-bye.